SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon has promised to represent the interests of voters across the UK, if her party wins influence at Westminster. Ms. Sturgeon launched the Nationalists' election manifesto, pledging to fight for public spending increases and end cuts across Britain. And she said SNP MPs would make Scotland stronger at Westminster. Ms. Sturgeon's political opponents said her manifesto commitments would plunge the UK further into debt. Polling has suggested no party will win an overall majority on May 7, and the SNP could be the UK's third largest party. Labour has rejected the idea of a coalition with the SNP, although its leader, Ed Miliband, has refused to be drawn on whether another arrangement, such as a vote-by-vote deal, could be done. Ms. Sturgeon said she would not do any deal which would put the Conservatives into power, but argued her party could use its influence to make a Labour government bolder and better. She said, "This is a manifesto to make Scotland stronger at Westminster. The pledge I make to the Scottish people is this. If you vote SNP on May 7, we will make your voice heard more loudly and clearly than it has ever been heard before at Westminster." In other election news, David Cameron promises an annual review of the impact of further Scottish devolution on the rest of the UK. Anyone wishing to vote on May 7 must register by midnight on Monday. Labour is focusing on health, claiming there is wide support for NHS charging and privatisation among Tory councillors. Sinn Féin has launched its election manifesto, saying it wants an extra £1.5 billion for Northern Ireland in negotiations with an incoming government. In a direct address to people in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the Scottish First Minister added, "Although you can't vote SNP, your views do matter to me, and you have a right to know what to expect of my party if the votes of the Scottish people give us influence in a hung parliament. If the SNP emerges from this election in a position of influence, we will exercise that influence responsibly and constructively, and we will always seek to exercise it in the interests of people not just in Scotland but across the whole of the UK." The SNP manifesto included pledges to increase spending by 0.5% a year, providing an extra £140 billion to support the economy and public services, including an extra £24 billion for the NHS across the UK. Set an annual UK target to build 100,000 affordable homes. Increase the minimum wage to £8.70 by 2020. Restore the 50p top income tax rate for those earning over £150,000. Support an increase in the employment allowance from £2,000 per business per year to £6,000, to help smaller firms take on more staff. Oppose the £3 billion cut in disability support. Keep the triple lock on pensions and protect the winter fuel allowance. Reacting to the SNP manifesto, Scottish Labour leader Jim Murphy said it was astonishing the SNP did not rule out a second independence referendum. Speaking at a charity football event, he argued more pressing issues, like rebuilding the NHS, banning zero-hours contracts and increasing the minimum wage, needed to be addressed. Mr. Murphy said the SNP had missed the opportunity to stick to their word that the independence vote was a once-in-a-generation event. Scottish Liberal Democrat Alistair Carmichael said the SNP manifesto had confirmed a £180 billion borrowing plan which would cost £3.1 billion a year in interest repayments alone. And the Scottish Secretary said Ms. Sturgeon's backing for full fiscal autonomy, which would see Scotland gain control of all its own tax powers, would create a £40 billion black hole Scotland's finances. Debt increase. He explained, "This is a manifesto of short-term thinking leading to long-term debt. Instead of taking the opportunity to map a route out of debt, Nicola Sturgeon is sticking with a plan to plunge the country further into it." The policies announced today are based on billions of pounds of borrowed money. Scottish Conservative MSP Meadow Fraser said Ms. Sturgeon was offering the country a false prospectus by promising an end to austerity. Mr. Fraser said the SNP's plans for full fiscal autonomy would leave Scotland facing an additional deficit of £7.6 billion, leading to huge cuts in health and education as well as tax rises. He argued the SNP would hold Labour to ransom at Westminster, with the sole purpose of breaking up the UK.